Oh, it's be a bit better today because we've got better internet, I think. We'll see anyway. All right. Hi there. This is Darren Doherty with Gerardo Ruiz Smith, who's based in Cuatrociénegas, which is in the province, sorry, not province, but northeastern Mexican state of Coahuila.
Wow,
Which I know,
yeah,
Coahuila, which I know I'm getting all bad.
is
But
that
anyway,
tricky?
I'm not afraid to have a go. So here we are. So welcome, Gerardo. So we're going to
Thank you,
talk
Darren.
about their project in up that way with the foundation that he works with. Some of you might have caught up with some of that last time we talked, but we didn't have a very good connection, so we're going to have a bit more of a crack. And so here we go. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Very excited. Very exciting to be discussing this project with everybody and yourself.
So, where are we up to, Gerardo? We're talking about the Santuario, which is this extremely unique part of this planet. And so, where's things? Have things progressed, or what's happened since we last talked a couple of weeks ago?
Well, we are working on the finalizing some of the permits for the first bison that we are receiving. So only going to be three male bison that are being donated by the local desert museum, that also has a zoo area. And so we're just getting ready in the main metal facilities. The corral we had at the entrance of the project. We're replacing the water mill that we had for that artisanal well that we have there.
Mhm.
Just buying a new one so that it's reliable in terms of water. The other
Yeah.
one was so rusty and breaking up.
So, why
So,
not a solar? You decided against that, or
well, it's a very good location for wind apparently,
yeah?
and those are made here locally. Those
Oh,
wind
sweet,
ones,
beautiful. Yeah,
yes.
and they'll
And I
last
guess
forever.
they last long time, and they add this como old-fashioned
Yeah,
Mexican ranch style as well, which I
great.
think
Perfect. No, I was
is
just curious because a
yeah.
lot of people go solar these days, and but windmills are fantastic if you have the wind. You're going to
It's
pump up
interesting
to a
because
tank because there
it
wasn't
goes to
before.
a concrete tank. I don't know if you
Yeah,
remember, but it's
yeah, I
just
do
next
remember
to
that.
the
Yeah,
mill. It's also a trough
yeah,
around the tank.
yeah. Got it. Yeah, perfect.
So we've been filling that, and it's nice for wildlife. We saw a black bear and deer drinking from that trough as well.
Oh, okay, sweet.
Yeah.
Oh, you got a camera set. You've got cameras everywhere, right?
I have one at the spring that we went. Oh, we didn't go to, and I've
Yeah.
been getting really nice footage of black bears and mule deer, coyotes, foxes, and we have very interesting these uh, introduced species of sort of a bighorn from Africa.
Hmm.
Berberis. I'll show
Was
you.
there a species there already of
Yeah,
sheep?
the bighorn desert bighorn sheep. It's native to the area, but they don't. It's pretty much extinct in the region where I am.
Right.
So in this mountain range, there is no native bighorn sheep, but we do have it's called the uh, Barbary sheep from the Sahara and the Sahel Desert.
Hmm.
It was brought here for hunting and to a few private ranches, and then they
After
became
the native
feral.
ones were killed, they decided to bring another one.
Yeah, and those are doing excellent. They're
Yeah,
like
right.
populating the whole northern country and the U.S. as well.
Yeah.
There are quite a few programs to eradicate them. Obviously, they're failing absolutely in
Mm.
doing that. And we have a family that I've been photographing. I was just checking the footage today, actually. So it's interesting because it can be used for hunting. We can sell hunting permits.
Yeah.
Um, they go for about $5,000 for a male, so it's not a terrible thing.
So what do you mean? How does that work?
Oh, so people pay $5,000 if you give them the permit to hunt one of these introduced sheep,
Wow,
basically.
that's an expensive barbecue.
They pay for the native one, for the desert bighorn sheep, it can go up to $50,000 to kill one in the wild.
Well, it's amazing that they'd even allow that to happen if they're so rare.
Well, I mean, in the areas where there's population, extra males, they have a whole program of management of the population, and they can
Got
get
it.
permits for some,
Got it.
but up to 50, sometimes $60,000, which is insane.
Yeah. So do you
Yeah.
provide people with a rifle and all of that, or is that, or
They
they
bring
there
their rifle, you just provide them with accommodation and a guide to drive
Yeah,
them around.
got it. And then they manage
That's
the rest.
usually the deal.
Yeah, got it. Cool.
So
And
yeah, we're
Sotol,
basically,
is there a Sotol allowance in that 5,000?
there is, we we apply for the permit for two protected species, and that's the permit we got approved. One is American bison, and the other one is Sotol.
Yeah. So for those people who
Uh,
don't know, Sotol is you might say the third liquor of Mexico, which is made from a genus which is part of the asparagus family, as I understand.
Dasylirion is the genus.
And there's how many species?
About 4 or 5 species.
Yeah. Whereas mezcal is made from what, 100 different agave species, right? And then tequila is made from one or two agaves.
One, basically.
Yeah.
And Sotol also has the denomination of origin, the name, the protected copyrighted name, basically. And it's also only 3 states in northern Mexico are allowed to make Sotol. And it's interesting, economically speaking. Now it's becoming quite well known in around the world. I saw a few bottles in the Bay Area for $200. And recently, Lenny Kravitz, the rock star, he just bought a brand of Sotol as well.
Yeah, I think you told me about that. Just wait one
Yeah.
moment. I've got something to show people.
Oh, perfect. I'm excited.
Oh, so it's way too early in the day. But well, it is and it isn't, I suppose. But it is for me. I'm still working. But this is the bottle. This is a bottle that we got while we were in Mexico last October, September, October. It was only about 3/4 full. It wasn't full, and as you can see, we've still got about a quarter of the bottle. We've been rationing it, Gerardo. You'll be pleased to know in these glasses. It's a very, very
Amazing.
small glass. So Lisa collects glasses, and this is the perfect little sipping Sotol glass. So we're trying to get there until we're able to replenish this bottle again of this very, very special liquid. So there you go,
Well,
mate. So if you can pass on,
hopefully I can.
I forget the gentleman's name, but if you can pass on to him that we are treating this with great care. We have actually had a few people try it, and we only ever use these glasses. We have 2 of these, and they're just for a sip only. No,
Amazing.
no
I
shot.
just took a screenshot to share with Mauricio.
Oh, yeah.
Another Mau.
Here's a better screenshot. We'll do that.
Just
There
give
you
me a
go.
second, please.
No worries.
Perfect.
There you go.
Got it.
So
So Sotol, yes, it's becoming a very interesting crop, actually, economically speaking, and a lot of it is being exported to the US and Europe.
Yep.
And we have a incredibly high density of Sotol on this site, and we hired a forestry engineer who made a plan for like a management plan of the populations of Sotol, and it was approved by the federal environment.
So that's for within the Santuario.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Because that's going to be
So
something that I suppose when we're looking at the impact of grazing, just how much area is of the Sotol is protected, because it does have I mean, it is an interesting thing in a sense when we look at this economically, for a site like this, just how much value there is potentially from Sotol, especially if it goes on to then be made and marketed
yeah,
by the same enterprise, as compared with what would be the relatively low income from grazing itself on a
process.
landscape that currently
Right.
doesn't have a lot of grazing value.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is in itself interesting because Sotol, in at least in these sort of landscapes, it's obviously a sign of or a result of the desertification
Mm.
process of overgrazing.
So is it a
Uh,
plant? Is it a plant that outside of this zone, but if we go to the other landscapes that are part of the foundation's management, is it a plant that could be grown in some sort of agroforestry system or some sort of
Absolutely.
plantation system?
That's already being done in Chihuahua, which is the largest Sotol producer. They're actually doing nurseries of Sotol and planting it in
Got it.
straight lines.
Well, I
Not in
imagine it
any,
wouldn't be very difficult to grow in a nursery situation. It grows
not at all.
from divisions.
They've been doing it by seeds. It doesn't create like the agaves, like the shoots.
Mm,
Uh,
right,
but
right.
uh, but they're still doing it on a pretty large scale. Obviously, unfortunately, they're falling back in the same monoculture
Yeah,
mentality like
yeah,
agave and
yeah, sure.
tequila,
Yeah,
etc.
yeah, yeah.
But it could definitely be integrated into diversified silvopastoral systems.
Yeah, like
Although,
a mesquite system or
yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
yeah, but there's still a massive density of Sotol already that we can just manage and utilize. So part of the idea, as I mentioned to you when you were here, is to replicate some of the facilities of the old school traditional Sotol distilleries
Hmm.
that there were usually illegal underground up in the mountains. They Sotol always had that like underground uh, vibe because it was actually illegal for quite a long time here in Mexico.
Yeah, right.
So basically, replicate that architecture and build a traditional distillery on site where
Yep.
people can come and learn about the whole process and actually buy a limited edition bottle of El Santuario Sotol.
Got it.
And
Got it. Yep.
that's going to be another source of revenue, basically,
Yep.
uh,
Cool.
which
But
ties very
well,
well with
what
the
with the management plan? What was when you had to talk to the authorities? What was the conversation, or what did you arrive at in terms of integrating grazing on a Sotol landscape?
Yeah, they don't care much about the grazing aspect. They're just concerned about the density of plants and the age of plants. And then they break down the landscape in different lots, let's
Hmm.
say. And they say, year one, you're allowed to harvest 250 plants from this section over here.
Got it.
Year two, you're allowed to harvest X amount of plants from this section over here. So it's just like a rotational
Harvesting
harvesting.
system. But then if we have the impact of grazing, or we're trying to change the landscape quickly into grazable area, such as by using
The
some
roller.
sort of roller or other mechanical means, how does that impact the management plan and what they've allowed?
Yeah, it's interesting because they like this management plan, it has absolutely no supervision by the government.
Hmm.
It's
That's
just
a
the fact that if I'm selling bottles or transporting plants, I need to show that it came from a management approved system. But
but
in
the man
reality, I can
it's not policed.
it's not police at all. Zero,
Yeah.
absolutely not. So it's mostly when the trucks are moving the big piñas, the hearts of the Sotol from one place to the other, they are usually stopped by the cops just to see if they have the permit for the
Got
harvesting.
it. Got it. Got it.
Uh,
So
but
the
we could
government
actually,
takes a bit of money at the start so that they've got that, and then afterwards, well, it's yeah.
and then
Well,
the
I mean,
taxes on
well,
the, on the
I suppose just I'm always curious about regulation because regulations can get in the way of nearly everything. Um, but it's only if it's policed, and again, if we're looking to convert a lot of what is a sotol and mesquite and other native woody plants into a grassland or a woody grassland, then what are the implications in terms of agreements that have already been made?
yeah,
Um, so, I mean, part of that is to do compensatory efforts where, maybe on other parts of the landscape, or we create reserves, or a few other different concepts that we have where we have preserved strips, as
yeah.
we've discussed before, those sorts of things, because I would say it's fairly difficult to maintain a sotol landscape and have a productive grazing landscape at the same in the same plot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be relatively difficult.
And also it's not the Sotol population. There's areas with much higher density, small ones, and other areas that are almost bare with Sotol. So we can also play around, and if there's an area with really high density and really old plants, then we can protect and leave that
Yeah,
area
yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah. That makes perfect sense. So that's a GIS
Yeah.
program then of identifying those plots, and because you want that to
It,
happen before the roller starts rolling through the
yes,
place, if that's
absolutely.
how. Well,
Which is what we discussed last called
yeah,
the plan that for Georgie to actually make the uh well to work on the slope map so that we can have it a little
yeah,
bit more detailed in some
yeah,
areas
yeah,
and be able to decide
yeah,
which which areas are the ones with the highest priority to work on this grassland conversion uh, method or
yeah,
process. No?
yeah,
What are the areas with the highest grassland potential, basically,
yeah.
and just focus there, even if it's a very small area in comparison. Just focus initially on working on those specific
Well,
flat. Yeah,
yeah, and I agree. I think that where given that you are starting with such a small number of animals, and just thinking out aloud, it might be feasible to commingle some of those three bison with, say, some cattle that are also, local cattle, which are obviously fairly available, um, just so that you had a few more animals. Because if you've only got three, well, then you can only use so much area and get so much impact, and maybe work on a half a hectare at a time sort of thing. And because I think part of the whole game in any case is, and this happens for all sorts of different places around the world, particularly when you're looking at, well, the way I put it is, if you're looking at a sort of a very hard conversion from, I can see your screen, by the way, just in case you've got private stuff on the screen. Um, the the if you've got a landscape which is in a particular state right now, and then you want to convert it, and that really hasn't been done too much, well, then doing some sort of pilot study over a year or two is it I would say advisable. So at the very least, you can test a few methods, conversion of landscape methods, so that you can then find what works best with the resources that you have, and the expectations that you have. It's similar to when we talk to people about if they want to establish trees in a particular landscape. There's there's no one way of establishing trees in a landscape. You have to work that out, and sometimes that'll, especially because a lot of people are looking at doing very large scale tree projects or agroforestry projects in new areas where that hasn't necessarily been done at scale. It's very different to do things at scale than it is to do on a homestead scale. There's a whole bunch of different factors that come into play, and so it's definitely worthwhile doing some of the trial work, the R&D, so that you can work out what is the best pathway and what's the and that I think is sensible. Otherwise, you end up running the risk of what Bill Mollison used to call type 1 errors, and Alan Savory, I think, put it well in the holistic management feedback loop, in the framework of when planning it with the environment, assume that you are wrong, and so going that safely approach is, or small scale approach is definitely the way to go. And we only have 3 animals and maybe another 10 or 15 cattle mixed in or something like that. Keeps the fencing simple and enables us to get the impacts and move along with things.
Yep,
So
the cattle.
Go on.
The cattle possibility, very feasible to get some animals from the neighbors and bring them in.
Yeah.
And also, like, if everything goes well, at the end of the year, we could be thinking about buying the rest of the herd with 15, 18 bison more from Chihuahua.
Yeah.
And then that'll be, I guess, good enough to begin.
Yeah, definitely. But in the meantime, you could certainly start bale grazing and doing that sort of thing. And because the other part of this too, Gerardo, will be, which is always interesting. Let's say that we use, I'll just say a half a hectare as an example. So 5,000 square meters as an area, and I'm not basing that number on anything. I'm just putting that out there. But let's say that we've got a 5,000 square meter area, and we do bale grazing in that, and then we monitor that, right? So that say they're in that area for, let's say, a week, just for example, and then we move on to the next area, and each of those, I'll call them squares, each of those plots, I'll call them that, you monitor their position, and we monitor what they look like going in, what they look like going out, and then we come back to them, say, once every month or something like that, and see what happens. Because what will be interesting will be the relationship between when that impact occurs or when that treatment occurs, and then what happens as a result of whenever it is that rain follows, because this is a rain-fed system, and what do you have? 10 rain days or 20 rain days a year out there. So that's the rarity. And they're fairly spread over a very long summer. So that proximity between when you do a treatment and then when you get rain will be fascinating to see. But I think that's I keep thinking about ways of managing this feasibly, and I think that's possibly the best way to go. And then we can, plot by plot, we've got all of this evidence that's starting to be built, whether that's moving out to 1 hectare for 5 days, or a quarter of a hectare for 2 days, all of those sort of density trials that can be done. It'll probably take about a year for us to get the full regime of evidence that will then say again, well, here's the way to go by the time we get to those other 18 or 20 bison coming on board. And then you either keep the cattle commingled so that you've got a decent, you go up to, say a 40 head herd, or you switch back to having a 20 head bison only herd, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that sounds really.
Is that, what have you thought about that sort of thing? Have you, in terms of plotting this out?
Yeah, I mean, when I was thinking about the three initial animals, I wasn't necessarily thinking about doing a constant rotation of fencing and systems because it's just very few impact by itself.
Yeah.
I was thinking right now, since it's not the growing season, to get them used to the corral facilities where they will have salt and water and complementary feed, and start after a few weeks or a month or two, start opening the gates so that they can go roam around, start getting to know the vegetation, graze right now during the dry season, which it wouldn't be an issue in terms of overgrazing necessarily. And they will just slowly start coming back. Well, they will come back for water because there wouldn't be any other source. And then keep them in the corral at night, open up at day, so that they just start getting used to the, let's say, to the environment. And then what I was imagining as a next step is during the rainy season, create bigger subdivisions or one initial subdivision where we can concentrate all the animals during the growing season, just to make sure that the rest of the land has all the recovery period that it needs. And but without having to invest a lot of money in like big fencing subdivisions along the whole property. Just like I don't know if that makes sense, but like a sacrificial paddock, let's say.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and the corral systems are often based like that. What sort of what you're saying is a way, of course. I think that the risk of that is if you don't have some sort of boundary to them, well then when you let them out and for a bit of a wander, well, it's a big bloody area to wander, and they're pretty important animals. So I think also that there's no reason why, if you wanted to make the corral home and the corral is the source of water, that it or other central water points that you have a laneway to water, but then the laneway goes back out to feed, and that the animals so therefore what becomes sacrificial to an extent is the laneway and the corral, but secondly that 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 you are then able to still manage some sort of rotation, which I would just use temporary fencing with temporary electric fencing. Probably, and I'm not by no means an expert with bison, but probably with a simple 2-wire earth return system, I would use probably the easiest thing to use would be sharpened 1/2 inch or 12mm rebar, concrete rebar posts with what's called multi-rod insulators, which are widely available, and you can switch. Then you can change the height of them, and you've got a bit of flexibility while you're trying to work out what the best height for the wires would be. But having an earth return system so that even though it's dry, they'll still learn the fence. And that goes to what you might do as a really first stage. A lot of, again, I'm not familiar with bison, but others will have some a better well, experience. But generally with cattle, what we will do when we're acclimatized, well, having them learn electric fencing is, yeah, bring them into a corral and then make a sort of a bigger holding area around the corral so that they can, the corral might be home, and obviously that's where you're bringing them, you're unloading them, but then you've got an area around the corral which is fenced, and it might only be a hectare or something like that. And then they go out and find the boundary of that, but that's electrically fenced, but it's big enough area so when they get first spooked by it, they're not going to lose it or be lost. And you can also adjust the shock on the fence if you've got a modern energizer, so that the first shocks are not as great as the so there's things like that that you can do, so they because they'll inquisitively go up to the edge of a fence and test the area, test that they'll see a wire. I mean, obviously they've come from an area which has wire fences, so they've already got that memory of what a wire fence looks like.
Yep.
Whether that's had electrons running through it or not is another matter. So they've got to get that familiarity. So yeah, so that's that sort of area that you're looking at there.
So this is the actual corral. This
Yep.
is divided in two sections.
Yep.
And then this section is a paddock that I was intending on doing as permanent electric fencing.
Yep.
Just to have this possibility that you're mentioning for them to go into
right.
a
Training area. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and that's also a mustering area. So when you're bringing the animals in for, for for any inspections and all of the rest of it, you can bring them into that area, and that's sort of like the chill area until they need to come in, and be inspected and so on. So yeah, that can work perfectly, and that's a really good pilot spot as well, right? And then you've got areas in every direction from there, which you can then expand from.
Yep. And also it's going to be interesting because there's a lot of Sotol and prickly pear, nopal.
Yeah.
So we can do different treatments here and just see how it responds.
Is there buffle there as well?
Yes, a lot of buffle.
Yeah.
It's actually quite good pasture. It's flat.
Yeah.
And
yeah. No, I think I recall that area because we did come into that way. But it'll be. I mean, that's as we know from having visited other places, one of the direct impacts of a higher density grazing is an increase in buffle, and of course there's a resistance to buffle, which I think is good reason because it's an invasive grass, but it is what it is too. It is all that there is in some cases. So it'll be interesting to see how that succession process works over time.
I guess for me right now the main priority is ground cover and photosynthesis.
Yeah.
Whoever volunteers to do it.
Yep.
First.
Yeah. I agree.
I can show you what I was imagining in terms of fencing if I was thinking on permanent subdivisions.
Yep.
I was imagining basically the black lines are the roads. And the red ones are the proposed permanent fencing. This yellow one is a proposed road that's following the creek.
Yep.
What we were saying the other day. So basically using sort of the current road layout to make it easy to install the permanent fencing.
Yep.
And then I was imagining like here by itself, now I have a big paddock by which can be further subdivided in any way, of course.
Yeah.
Then here there was an old road on this straight line that I was imagining could be a possibility for a line of electric permanent fencing as well.
Yep.
So then I could make subdivisions towards the road, either on this direction or on that direction.
Well, the issue with all of that, as I see it, that's all fine. I mean, there is an argument to say that, especially in the era of relatively lightweight and relatively low-cost electric fencing, that the cost of fencing per hectare is not as considerable as it once was when everyone was doing hardwire fencing. So so there's that to put out there. Secondly, that I think you're right. The placement of fencing, which is contiguous with access, is a very reasonable way to do subdivisions. Is to the two go together. The third element which goes together with that, of course, is water, and that's I suppose in the design that you just showed there, the missing piece. And if we're going to subdivide, well, we're starting to look at, the discussion is that if an animal has to walk, and it varies according to species and all of the rest of it. But if an animal has to walk about 1 to 1.5 kilometers for water, then that will start to have an impact on animal performance. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule, excuse me. That's not a hard and fast rule because it depends on the climate at the time and a whole range, whether the animal's pregnant or whether it's calf, all of that stuff, right? So there's a bunch of factors there, and the breed and also the and the genetics of that breed, just how adapted it is to the climate and the situation. So the early concept of walking back to water may not be the best policy when we look at a more rotational grazing system. So therefore, we start to look at, all right, if we've got water source, then pumping up to tank or pumping up to point and then running pipe, so that we can start to have a more flexible grazing arrangement.
Which this is what the previous owners did actually. So this is the spring that's up on the landscape, that we didn't get the chance to go, but it's quite high in elevation. And from there, they were siphoning the water to a concrete water tank that's located just below the spring.
Yep.
And from there, they were running polypipe, basically following this road and this road. Yep. And they have a concrete trough here.
Yep.
It's already in place.
Yep.
And then it will follow. The pipe still there. It's broken in many areas. And it comes down to this other trough over here.
So when you've got a fixed water point system, that's when the sacrificial area is then around the trough, and
Yep.
you have to have a sort of a radial sort of system around that, like what they have in holistic management, the sort of wagon wheel type fencing. You've got a hub and spoke system. Is that what you're looking to start with?
No, I was just mapping here what it's.
Yeah, no, I was just curious whether you were actually looking in your progression, whether you were looking to have portable troughs that use that existing infrastructure, or using the current troughs and having a wagon wheel fencing system.
I was thinking more like setting up main lines around like strategic polypipe lines, and then do the portable from those lines.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
and is that a 2-inch pipe? Do you know what sort of?
It's about 2 inch.
Yeah. Well, that's relative. I mean, that's relatively straightforward. You may well, and the pressure is not going to be that great in it, is it? Do you know what?
It is.
What sort of height difference have we got over the distance?
So right here, it's 100, 1,200, 10 meters.
Yep.
Those two was 63 meters difference.
Okay. So there's about 5 or 6 bar. It'll be just interesting to, I don't know whether we could find out by opening up a section of the pipe and seeing if it's got any markings on us to tell us what the rating of the pipe is. So there would be what's called a PN rating. I don't know what that is in Mexico, but the PN rating is the pressure normal, and pressure normal is the pressure rating of that pipe at usually at 20 degrees centigrade. Now, did you say there was 63 meters over the total length of the pipe in height difference?
No, just from the spring to this bottom part, but it actually then goes up.
Goes up again and then goes down. Oh yeah, it stays at a pretty consistent contour there, doesn't it, when it goes across the slope?
I can turn on the contours. So it comes down and then it actually goes up again.
Up. So what is it
And
up there? What's
then
that altitude at the trough
yeah, it's
2?
only like 10 meters below the tank.
Ah, okay. That's interesting. And no problem
And
with water flow with that over that, even
well,
over
it's not working anymore, so it's
that.
hard to tell.
Yeah, I mean, these are the things to commission because, when you go down a slope and back up again, there's all of these dynamics as far as air getting into
Yeah.
the system
Yeah.
and so on, which will be interesting to see how that actually functions and what
I don't think it
retrofitting needs.
was, I'm sure it wasn't designed or planned at all. It was just done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's so. I think what we need to do is one. Um, dig up a section and see if we can find out what the rating of the pipe is. I mean,
Yep.
you may be able to do it even close to the water tank where the outlet is. That's probably the
Yeah, I
natural
can do
place to
that.
do it. I mean, usually over a pipe's length, there's markings every few meters of the pipe length of what the pipe rating is. And then from there would be, I would say, to run it through to trough 1 and or run it through to trough 2, run it through to trough 1, and just recommission it and just let it run so that the air can come out of it and just see how that works. Secondly, will be with the subdivisions and you've got fairly equal area. I mean, I look at it and go, with that current layout, the actual better position for the pipeline would actually be along the middle, along the old central straight road,
Here.
because then you've got that to service both sides. Yeah. So that's a question. I mean, I wouldn't suggest pulling the pipe up, of course, but it probably would make better sense if you were going to put new pipe in to service this layout, then you'd be putting it right down the middle there.
And just to clarify, the existing pipe, it's actually broken in many sections, so
Yeah,
it's not
right.
really functional. It's just there as a remnant of what it used to be. But
Okay. So, yeah. So it may need recommissioning altogether
yeah,
anyway. All
yeah.
right. Well, if that's the case, then it might be, well, can we get the pipe down to the intersection with the central line? Yeah,
To
down to
here,
that point. And then if that's all functioning, hopefully install new pipe down the guts.
which is gonna come if it goes if I can get the water here with pressure and everything, then it goes downhill from here,
It's
which is
falling
not.
all the way. So what we've then got to calculate is from that point, basically from, so just going back a moment, one of the things that I advise people when they annotate a Google Earth map is anything to do with water, always put a level there, because then wherever you've got, so at the spring, I want to know what the level is. We can look it up, of course, but like for me, I'd prefer to see not spring. I'd prefer to have SP 1,227 meters. That's more informative to me than the word spring. You see what I mean? And then you go to water tank. Water tank, I'd want to go WT 100, which would mean WT 100 kiloliters or 100 cubic, whatever the size of the tank is, and then what the elevation of the tank is, right? So you start to use your annotation so that when it's on the screen, you immediately are able to get a lot more information about it rather than just the name. I shorten it up too because the way it works is, so I wouldn't have the spaces. Sorry to be annoying, but just
SP
SP dash one, then go to straight to your number. Yeah, yeah. That's fine. SP 1275 is fine. That's all we need to know, right? And then that, oh, looks like that didn't do it. Wrong label. But yeah, you do that across the plan, and then that immediately just identifies everything
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
for its altitude. because that's such an important part of the whole water planning thing. And any key points on the plan, like where that crossing is or where the fence crossing is and so on, you would put a spot height there. So the other thing, so if we look at what was the height on the water tank?
Water tank was 1258.
1258. So we've got 1258 there. We've got 12. So SP is at 1275. WT. One of the things that you can do then in a grid, which is what we often talk to people about, is you can make a schematic of your water layout and start based on the different flows from this point to this point. Water in pipelines also, when you're designing reticulation systems, you're looking at this. I look at it from a so. If I was to look at this, I'd go, all right, from SP to WT, there's a length of pipe. That pipe has a specification and it has parts involved, right? So it's a parts list, okay? Then you go from WT 1258, say, down to the main crossing point where the water's going to change direction. So that pipe would have a specification, and in a bill of quantities, it might have a number of joiners, or it might, or those joiners would have a specification, and that they might be where you're doing pipe welding with a joiner. You might have some sort of welding clamp on there with a thread that you can stick a hydrant into or a valve, or there might be pressure release valves, or there might be air release valves, right? So there'll be those sorts of things which happen over the distance of a pipe. So from WT 1258 down to the crossing, that's pipe. Let's say that's pipe 2 in the shopping list, and it's got a range of components. So you break it up into pipe lengths from node to node, and then you would go, all right, now we go down the slope, down towards the yards to the corrals, and that's say pipe 2, and it's got its specifications as well. So we try to do that so that it becomes because everything links back to cost, and then everything links back to return on investment that way. You know, you've got your CapEx, and then you've got your OpEx coming together, and that's where you calculate your capital expenditure, CapEx, operating expenditure, OpEx, and that's where you're coming back to then get your return on investment, which is, you know, part of the business of deciding what you do where and how and over what time.
Yeah, makes total sense. So I can start mapping the intersection points with the altitude.
Yeah.
Imagining,
and then that'll tell us what specification we'll need on the pipe itself, right? And the fittings, of course. Were you going to, with the fittings, etc.? I can't recall this conversation if we had it. Were you looking at doing fusion welding, or were you looking at using compression fittings, or how were you looking to play that game?
Yeah, we didn't have that conversation.
Yeah, we didn't have that conversation. Yeah, okay. What do most people use in the district, or where they do? Is it compression fittings mostly?
Compression mostly.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay.
Then we have the other deep well. Remember, in the center,
the
metal pipe.
Yeah.
So that's another source of water. It's right now the level is around 40 meters, 35 meters to the water.
Yep.
And we have that concrete pond that Pemex, the oil company, built as well.
Yep.
So here I've been thinking about even we want to start soon building some composting toilets, showers, and installing some of the glampings, tents that we have.
So the foundation water supply for that will be the well, as opposed to the spring for the stock water.
It just makes sense.
Of course. And is it yield okay?
Yeah, it's quite good. I mean, we need to make better measurements, but They pump it with a petrol water pump for a few hours, and it didn't really lose much.
Okay, that's good. Good to know. Yeah, great.
My screen is going to start turning red for the blue light now. Let me fix this.
Okay. Oh, the time of day. Oh, yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah.
So a solar pump, I'm
Yeah.
thinking here,
Yep.
to a plastic tank and eventually to the concrete, and or depending, probably both, no, because we want the plastic tank for the toilets and the showers,
Yeah.
and then be able to fill the concrete pond maybe for.
So will you have will you put the plastic tank on a tank stand and then use gravity from that?
Yeah, that's the idea. Or put it on top of the actual building of the showers, which we're gonna do with ground earth,
Yeah.
and then maybe a little extra pump for pressure. I'm not.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting one because there's I suppose there's two arguments there. One of the things is, we want well, so for people listening, this part of the ecosystem of this whole project is that the main sponsor of this also owns the private sponsor owns hotels and a sort of a tourism business within and that's all private, right, Gerardo? That's not part of the So that's all private. So you've got this integration between a foundation and its activities, and then the activities of a for-profit enterprise, which is using this landscape for ecotourism and so on. Now, this is where we get to hospitality questions and the way that we manage the ecotourism element in saying, all right, well, if we're gonna have showers, which are, people have, you need to have sanitation. What sort of do we apply? Do we give those showers pressure so that people have a normal Western shower experience, right? Or do we put time limits on the water use? There has to, I mean, from my perspective, in these sorts of situations, these can't be situations where there aren't limits.
Yeah.
And that's a conversation to be had. And so it's not just a simple, and then that is a conversation that then comes back to the practical design of a plumbing system, if you follow. So you kind of got to have this marketing question almost in order to be able to design how the plumbing will work.
And the human climate of the actual Fernando there as well.
All of that. How
to decide the plumbing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's not as straightforward. Like if it were you or me, I suppose we'd probably have a fairly straightforward system, and we already know and live within limits. But a lot of people who are coming to these places are still going through an educative process, and we want to create a good hospitality experience, but we've also got to create a learning experience at the same time.
Which is was quite I think it was really good that they were actually fine and open to the idea of making nice, fancy, beautiful, practical composting toilet systems.
Sure.
Which was
great.
already
There's so many that are great now. I mean, they're fantastic.
So I think there's a lot of openness, especially in this specific project, because they are very obviously aware of the context. So that they want to do it appropriately to the climate and the situation.
But there's still one person's appropriate as someone else's different, right? So you gotta land on that. And then there's then there's the clients, the guests, and what is I mean, they can be a pain in the ass, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah, we just went to a festival a couple of weeks ago, which is a very famous festival here, probably one of the most famous in Australia, and it it has 15,000 people, and it's all composting toilets, and it has been for a long time. And they use rubbish bins, wheelie bins. So
Yeah.
there's a company called Natural Events, which is a great brand name for a compost toilet company.
Naturally.
Natural Events, and they this was the first one that they did, and then they also Glastonbury, as I understand it, which is probably one of the best known festivals in the world, also use this same technology. So there is at least, and I imagine there would be a lot of the guests would be people who go to the outback festivals and those sorts of things. So there's already that sort of
Yeah.
vibe, um, happiness to spend time in nice glamping
Natural.
systems. But the main thing with compost toilet systems is that, as far as I can see, is having a ventilation system so that the aroma, I'll call it that,
Aroma.
doesn't enter the chamber, and that's really easy. That's
Yeah.
especially in a hot climate. That's very easy to
Yeah.
manage. So, yeah, cool.
Yeah, I have really good designs from my friends at Las Cañadas in Veracruz
Mhm.
that they've been perfecting composting toilets here in Mexico. It's usually the two-chamber concrete
Yeah, yeah,
things
they're the simplest things.
with big metal pipe painted black for
Yep,
ready
solid
for
chimney.
vacuum.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
yeah.
yep, yep.
And here it's gonna be much better than in the
Oh man,
cloudy.
that's yeah, for sure. That thing's gonna heat up. You'd almost have your bum sucked through the thing, I reckon, if you sat down.
Like an airplane
Yeah, that's
toilet.
right. It'd be a rocket toilet with a rocket convection system. I better stop because I could go wild on that one.
Like your stories with the catfish in
Yeah, I know.
Thailand.
I don't think catfish would go too well out here, though. This is not catfish country. Although there probably
So
were some catfish down in Pozas at one stage. I don't
we
know.
have a native catfish actually.
Yeah, all right. Don't tell me that.
So yeah, you can survive here. No.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, cool. Well, so this
Okay.
this sort of zone then, that I see, are we going to have to go around that? Like, so that's a precinct or a zone, and if that's an ecotourism zone, then we've got to have that. We've got to have it so that, well, there's currently the line that goes right through the middle of it below the earth dam, which is the position of the old road. We're going to need to look at the way that we move livestock around that now.
Yeah. I mean, this
Um,
line is barely visible. The
sure.
the the one in the middle, it's almost covered in vegetation.
Hmm.
I mean, you can still see it, but it's not.
Yeah.
So basically, I was imagining sort of this outline from this old
Yeah.
road that came this way
Yeah.
to reserve for, let's say, tourism in a way.
So,
Uh,
tell me about dust and wind in all of this sort of zone. There'd be a fair bit of that, I imagine. I mean, I was there on a
Not
beautiful
as
still
dusty
day. Yeah.
as the valley. The valley it's super dusty,
Yeah.
but here because it's more like gravelly,
Hmm.
the soil itself. Uh, I haven't experienced this como
I
dust
was
or
actually thinking of the dust that would be coming from other parts to here. Um, so I was
no
thinking, just from
no
the perspective, because where I was going, all right, well, would we surround this ring, this ecotourism hub, or this particular hub with some sort of vegetation,
yes.
that manage that?
I think that's something we want. Everybody is thinking about that, including Fernando. He's being very interested in seeing what trees could be established and irrigated so
Yeah.
that we could start having more shelter and shade in a way,
Do
which
you
I
have
totally.
any? Do you have any species which are endemic or native to Mexico, or or to the I'll call it the Sonora, Chihuahua, which have sticky leaves?
Sticky leaves?
Yeah, there are some species which have leaves which are sticky to touch. We have one species here in southern Australia, which I've used many times for dust for this sort of situation. It's called Acacia howittii. It's called sticky wattle. And it's a fantastic species from that perspective. You can put it up against and it grows like a hedge. It's a really densely leaved plant, lives for a long time. It's really fantastic. And you could put that in. I wouldn't put it in this situation, but and if I was in this region, if this region was in Australia, I mean, it would find it very hard because it's more of a warm temperate plant, not a hot climate plant. But it's a plant that does quite well. It does a very good job, and I was just wondering if there was an analog of that, or
Oh,
because you're kind of looking at fine or densely leaved fine leaf, but with dense foliage to trap dust. And if they've got sticky leaves, even better.
never thought about that. Like a fly trap for dust.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Oh, no, it's actually called a dust amelioration plant. I think is what they're called. Am I wrong there? I actually I found a reference to dust collection or dust attracting plants a couple of years ago for some reason that just came out of my brain. Anyway, was it dust amelioration? I can't remember now anyway. But there'll be some sort of architecture of planting which we'd have to look at yeah, as a screen,
Yeah,
as some sort of
I'll keep
capture
that a
system.
sticky leaf question in my mind, sticked in my mind because I cannot think on any one right now.
And then there's a
But
second. So I did this design years ago for a glamping system, which was by a riverside here in Victoria. And what I did with that was so you had the meta landscape, you might say, of the campground, but then you had around each tent, we sort of created um, a a privacy screen of vegetation around that. So that can be so the way I look at it here, you could have this is for both because you don't want to be buffeted by wind, and dust is a pain in the ass, right, for
yeah, yeah.
anyone. So if you could have multiple layers of vegetation, you've got the metal layer, which we're going to be working on over time, which is where all the bison will be, and then we've got the periphery of the precinct, and then
Mhm,
we've got internally, which might be a scattered sort of parkland of trees,
mhm,
and then you've got around each of the glamping huts another border of trees around that, or shrubs, I'm going to say, which give that privacy, but then also add to that just settling of the wind within the zone, um, and yeah, just make it so that people are a lot more comfortable. It's just a much more habitable place, of course,
totally.
and provide more habitat for birds. I mean, everyone loves listening. There's lots of beautiful birds out there. So any opportunity to increase habitat as well as function overall, yeah, just to put that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Um, and
That
that's something that this concrete pond with the solar pump could be used to start irrigating. And
yeah,
that might be a good idea to start soon as well because everything takes time here to grow
yeah,
in a way.
definitely. Well, the other thing is too that area. I mean, one of the things that strikes me for that area, I would put the animals there, and I would bale graze there so that you at least get the landscape settled down and you get a good. I mean, if you've got buffel grass growing everywhere there, happy days. I mean, again, you've got your ground cover that's going to settle that landscape
Yeah.
down, and
Pretty much this area here, it's all covered with buffalo.
yeah,
Very dense, actually.
yeah. Well, we
It's
could
one of
make it
the,
even better if we put the grazing animals on there and got
yeah,
some grazing impact and use that as a tool for for what is a landscape that's going to be landscaped. I mean, you're going to have
Yes.
some areas there where people are going to want to sit down on the ground and those sorts of things, right? So,
Yes.
yeah, not don't want to necessarily create lawns, but you can actually create, well, you can create some good desert grasslands in which people might want to sit and be on
Yes.
the ground and do things. So, yeah.
Well, I think it makes total sense before we begin construction if we start doing the bale grazing with temporary fencing, and we have water here.
Well, that's right. You
It's
got the
up.
basic infrastructure there.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And
And
you're gonna have to
just,
you're gonna have to fence this off anyway. So, yeah.
yeah, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
What will you do in terms of so the submergible solar pump inside the well pipe?
I think so. I think so because I mean we're still learning on it, so it's probably going to have to be a submersible um, which you can adjust the height on. So there's that. I think I'm not super up on all of this, but I think there are submersibles which have floats embedded in them, so they'll float on the water column. Just and if I remember correctly, there is actually a column of water there.
Yes.
That so is that. Do you know if the pipe sort of goes down and is it then perforated at the bottom and over a distance?
It's not perforated, which is what it makes it to a little bit slow in the recharge. I
Yeah,
guess it's just the only inlet is at the bottom of the metal pipe, which we're not even sure how deep it goes.
yeah. Well, that might be something in itself to if you can. I mean, obviously, this project, especially with the investment that's going on in here, there's going to have to be a bit of investigation. And I would be, and given this well is so key to this venture, it would be I would definitely recommend doing some investigation of the well and what it looks like. I mean, the water quality and quantity is one thing, but then just how reliable is that water quality and quantity going to be? Because it's one thing to go out there occasionally and put the pump on and see how
Yes.
that goes. It's another thing to have it do that, for a whole year.
Yeah.
Just so that you can make and whether that well needs to have a new casing put inside of it, whether it needs to be drilled a bit deeper so that you can put a perforated casing down below, and then that'll impact what sort of submersible gets, or what sort of pumping system gets put in there. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, we need to get more information on that well.
Yeah, and I don't know if there would be anyone local or whether there's probably, I mean, there'll be service providers.
Yes, we can find them.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think you're right with solar, because going wind on this one, while it's a nice idea, it's not necessarily reliable enough for this context. So solar is probably the go. And that may also link in to not necessarily having a solar powered pump, but having actually a solar array on the site, because you're going to need to put lights in there. You're going to need electricity.
Yep.
So, so having it's a natural thing to. I mean, when wouldn't you have solar energy available?
Yep.
Yeah.
So you're saying maybe run the pump from AC pump from
Well,
a
I mean,
solar array?
it'd be a conversation whether you run the pump independently of a power, like of a actual solar grid, which is powering the whole site,
Yep.
or whether it's all in one. I don't know.
Yep.
That'll be.
Yep.
I'm just putting that out there because I'm thinking of
Yep.
it.
Yep. Good.
I mean, it may be better. I don't know. It might be better to just have a dedicated system, and then it's just, just runs on its own. I mean, you don't need a lot of like a solar pumping system. You don't need a lot of panels, and so on to run a very powerful system. So
Yeah, we'll look into that.
Yeah.
And a similar situation down here in the entrance. we also want to build a couple of because there's going to be a little house for the security personnel who's
Yep.
going to spend it here.
Yep.
So same thing from the tank. Well, this is
Well,
being
that was going to be a windmill, wasn't it?
yeah, wind
Yep.
pumped into the tank. But
Yep.
then I was thinking maybe run a pipe up on the landscape to a water tank
Yep, for sure.
and then have gravity fed to the restroom.
Are you just looking at everything being poly tanks, or are you looking at do you have the availability of decent sized poly tanks to just buy and drop, or are you
Yeah,
looking at
that'll be the
ferro
easiest.
or at ferro cement?
Plastic polypipe will be the easiest.
Okay. Yep.
They're fairly available.
Yep.
And to go
What
up
sort of
this
size can you get? Can you get like 20,000 liter, 20 cubic meter? Okay.
10, 15. You can get up to 20.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We can get 50, I think 55,000 liter poly tanks now in Australia, so 55 cubic meter. But yeah, you can just go to a store and buy them.
Yeah. Now a lot of people are doing the geomembrane.
Yeah. Oh, in an old tank. Yeah.
Yes, or with a metal
Yeah.
mesh around it as well.
Yeah. 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 Oh, yeah. I have seen that. Yes. Yeah. Which is that's the most, I won't say the most popular, but well, definitely when you get, say, above, so I think 50 or 55,000 liters is the largest poly tank that you can buy in Australia now. And we have more availability of tanks than anywhere else in the world.
Yes.
And, but once you get above that, then the most popular is using some sort of corrugated iron, like roofing iron. And then that's put in, and then there's a 3 or 4 layer membrane inside. Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen anyone use a mesh thing. I think that's my biggest resistance to that would be would be the UV exposure. But I can see why people would do it, like using available materials.
Yeah, that's what they do. I mean, a lot of people try to put any like shade cloth around it so that the sun is not hitting the membrane directly, or climbing plants, vines around.
And they don't have any, they don't have any roof on those either, do they?
Oh, some of them do.
They do? Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All of the ones in Australia they've got a span, they've got a spans in them, and then it's all color bond, so it's a electroplated paint. So because it's quite a humid environment inside of a tank, so it's quite corrosive. Yeah. Anyway, cool. So what's that cylindrical feature there just below the corral? Is that another tank?
It was a metal. It's a metal tank, but it's all rusted, and it has
right.
no.
You've got that square. You've got the rectangular one, and that's the trough tank. Yeah.
This is the concrete trough tank.
Yeah, and are you gonna put a membrane in that, or is that ready to go?
It's ready to go. I just want to put maybe a metal roof.
Yep, got it. Okay.
But we just sealed the concrete tank. It's working fine.
If I would highly recommend that if you're going to put a roof over that, then you may well, again, because of the condensation factor, one is ensure that if it's a metal frame, ensure that it's all galvanized. So I think Fernando, he would have access to what's called hot dip galvanizing. So he would be able to get all of the metal. Like if you made, let's say, a truss frame, he should have access to facilities which can, so you make the truss and then it gets dipped in the galvanizing material as a whole. And then when you come out to the side, it can be then bolted together. But I would also consider elevating that enough so that you get the condensation out. Because if you put it right on top, it just for longevity purposes, if it's completely enclosed, well, then there's nowhere for the water vapor to go. But if it's just slightly elevated, even if it's just 6 or 12 inches of gap, you won't get as much condensation.
That's
I
a
mean,
great idea.
the problem with that though is as well, you might need to put some sort of screen on there
For
so
mosquitoes.
that well, not just mosquitoes, but also rats and mice and so on, and birds can't get in there because it's a natural nice place for them to perch. So
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, a lot of people would therefore just put it so that it's completely sealed, but yeah, condensation in these systems is a big problem for the roof. Yeah. Yeah.
What if I put like a plastic liner and then the metal sheet on top?
It's still going to be that it's you're still going to, are you talking about in the roof?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never seen anyone do that. Yeah, you've got to have sufficient insulation between any, like even just a normal cavity. If you have if you just have roofing iron and an exposed cavity, then you will get condensation off the roof. That happens every day, right? So
Mm.
that's why I mean shed we've got just at the back here. It's got roofing iron, and then it's got a layer of reflective foil insulation, which is only half an inch thick, and then it's got a layer of very fine mesh which holds the because you've got all of the bearers, the roof bearers. So what they do when they make the roofs on these buildings, the first thing that they do is they make the frame of the shed, and then they put the mesh out. The mesh has got, it's only a 1 millimeter or 1.5 millimeter wire. It's very fine, but the squares of it are about 20 centimeter squares. It's a welded mesh, and they roll that out, and then they roll the insulation out on top of that, and that mesh sort of stops the insulation from falling in between the bearers, right?
Yeah.
And then the roofing iron goes on top of that, and it's fixed to the bearers. So you've got and the battens which span the bearers. So there's that sort of design, and that immediately, because you've got that insulation, it stops the temperature inversion
Hmm.
that would otherwise occur, that creates the condensation, which then causes the dripping every day.
Hmm.
And yeah, so
Yeah.
you can certainly do that sort of thing to help, because you're insulating the temperature from, well, the hot temperatures from
From the side.
outside, but then you're also I suppose you've still got the water um, evaporating upwards, right? So yeah, I'm not quite sure on how to handle that one, apart from just strongly creating an anti-corrosion bond on the materials itself.
Yeah, but that's a great thing to consider because I wasn't thinking much about
Yeah, yeah. Even the shed. I mean, I don't know. When you look at the shed right there, the building right there, removing if is it iron roof?
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
iron sheet
yeah. So
with
even
no insulation at all,
yeah,
just
exactly.
the
So
setting.
so it could be that at the pitch of that roof, you either elevate the pitch and make it so that there's a possibility for air to release there, or you put the whirlybird sort of things to let them out.
Extractor.
But then also remove the roofing iron, and then put in insulation like the foil. Do you have the foil type insulation there? Is
Yep,
it? Yeah,
I saw that.
yeah. So you put that on, and the stuff I've got here, you can get just a thin foil, which is basically just a reflective foil, or as I got here, I got one that's actually got foil, then about an inch of insulation, uh, like a wool insulation, what do you call it? Rock wool. It's made from
Rocket.
yeah, it's like a fiber. It's very soft. And then on the other side of that so it's a sandwich of that rock wool in between two layers of reflective foil. And that provides even more insulation because it's so hot here, it's the same as where you are, that having that makes a massive difference to how the shed would otherwise perform.
Mm.
that just
The
makes
good
it a
thing
whole
about
much more habitable space.
the good thing about this building is the roof is quite tall. It's like probably
Yeah,
4 or 5 meters high in
yeah.
the center.
So what's that building
I
going to
guess
be used for?
right now it's going to be for the bales, the hay
Yeah,
storage, and tools and everything.
yeah. Okay.
And then the little tiny house for the security guy who's going to
Yeah.
be taking care of.
Well, it
Uh,
may be. I mean, another consideration in this as well, Gerardo, would be, I don't know whether, I mean, I look at that shed for the storage of bales, and it's probably not the best thing because, you know, just getting them in and out is, well, depends on the size of bales. If you've got little bales that can be handled by hand, I don't know if
they're all
that's
like
what,
that. I think
yeah,
that's what
okay,
we have.
yeah. But putting a gutter on that, on both of the both of the sides of that building, and then having that water go over to the trough tank, or having another tank on there that can supply drinking water for humans.
Portable, yes, that's
Yeah,
a great
yeah.
idea.
So putting that there somewhere. I mean,
Yeah,
a 10,000 litre tank would be all that's needed, right? And that would be all the drinking water that anyone would ever need there.
that's a
Humans,
great idea.
yeah. Because I was going to say, if you were gonna have a dedicated hay storage, well, then you might put that beside the trough tank. And in fact, you could consider actually having it as part of the whole structure of what goes over so the trough tank is sort of under the whole roof in a
Mm,
corner, and then you've got the hay storage to one side, and then the water from the trough tank from that roof goes into the trough tank as well,
mm.
whenever you do
I,
get rain. So
that's
yeah,
very creative. Uh,
yeah,
I like that idea.
because then you've got better accessibility to the hay. I mean, you don't need to put it in a brick building.
Yeah, good idea. I mean, eventually, once it's running as a tourist space, this is we're imagining this to be like the welcoming
Yeah,
center,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah,
with the booth and information and
yeah,
maps and
yeah. Sort of
everything.
an interpretive center and
Yes,
so on. Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
But right now, it's just going to be for storage
Yeah.
until we get
Okay.
that running.
Sweet.
Um, I was wondering regarding maps, should I work with Georgie or with Felipe to get those slope maps more detailed so that we
Well, of
can
course,
identify
I'm
them?
gonna have to say Georgie, but yeah, if I know he's looking for work too, so yeah,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
definitely I would suggest him. But
I'm,
the other thing is he's created a new, I don't know if you've seen, but he's created some new plugins for
I was
QGIS,
reading.
which quickly segment and give you a hectareage on each of them. He's been actually he what we've put on YouTube is nothing compared with what he's actually doing behind the scenes. We've sort of stopped doing the YouTube as much because he wants to. He's developing some stuff that he wants to monetize in a different way. So, but anyway, he yeah, he can do all of that quite quickly with the data. And
What specific specs will you be asking
well,
or
we we generally break slope maps up into 5-degree increments. Um, and then the step beyond that is to then, which is a relatively new thing that he does, is then to, um, like if you want to separate out all of the 5-degree slopes, then you can do that. If you want to separate out all of the 5 to 10, you can do that. So he's created a new algorithm that allows us to do that. And that's very useful because when you play that game, you can then start to partition different land uses and understand how much of, say, let's say, how much land have we got that's say 25 to 35% degree landscape, right? Well, we might say that the 20 each of those increments of slope are going to have a particular range of land uses. And then that helps us to project, along with other factors, how much of that land we're going to have to invest in, right? And, you know, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think as a starting point, that's where I would go.
And I'm wondering if we should use remember this was done by photogrammetry. I told you they hire a fixed wing drone company.
I think so. I think that would be, that's the...
Or the Inehi one.
Well, the Inehi one, I would say it depends on what has the highest resolution. I mean,
yes.
If the in terms of
yes,
centimeters per pixel. So
yeah,
I imagine that what's the Inehi resolution? What, 10 meters?
Yeah, the photogrammetry is going to be much higher.
Yeah, for sure.
It was, yes, but it's just they didn't map the highest areas, but we don't really need those. Actually.
No, I don't think so. If it basically, let's say, goes up to a limit of, I mean, we're not going to do much above what, 30 degrees of slope, do you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
What were
and
you
it's
thinking?
Actually covering where the spring and the water tank, which is like the highest area we're going to be doing anything.
Yeah. Well, I would say, look, let's put it through the screen of 5-degree increments, and then we can see what that looks like. And then I mean, there's the other thing that can be done is that you can do one of the photogrammetry based survey, and then you can do another of the Inehi, and then the two can be blended. I mean, that can be done. So either way, it's not a time consuming process. It's just it's click and then wait for the processing to occur. It's not like it takes days. Yep. It's a minutes exercise rather than a long sort of thing. But yeah, I think we'll do that. I reckon let's get both, because it's not a time consuming thing. And then yeah, so I'll instruct him to make a 5-degree increment of both Inehi. So Inehi is of everything, and then the photogrammetry is only of the valley more so.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Sounds good. Okay. And I can get in touch and just send him all the data, make sure, well, it's already on the Google Drive, but just make sure he has access to
it. Yeah. Well, maybe let's have a reference of that now if you can. Let's pull that up, and I know you've got to go, so we've got a hot date or clients.
You mean on the Google Drive?
Yeah. Just show me where that is, or if we already referenced that in the management group. Because he'll be up soon. What time of the day is it? Yeah, he'll be up in about 2 hours, so I can, and you'll be going to bed, and I can I can do the handover, as it were. So by the time you get up in the morning, you'll have a nice slope map to look at.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's how it often works. I've got people in your hemisphere, my hemisphere, and Georgie's, and the game often is to try and keep the nightclub going all night, all day.
Yeah, I found. No, I didn't. That was another folder. Let me. I'll look for that after the call, and just send you the link again.
Yeah, if you send me it again, and then it's fresh, and then it's good.
And make sure everything is there.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're probably coming to that point anyway now. So this has been very good. I think we've got some consolidation on a bunch of different factors. I think, like I said, if we can just round up, relabeling these key features on the map, I think
Yes, I will do that.
I think the new positioning of the water pipe system makes sense. We didn't talk about trough 3. Does that come from the spring as well? It's just up the back.
There's a artisanal well bore hole
Yep.
sort of thing,
Yep.
and they were actually you could see an old like solar array
Oh, I see.
structure. They
Right.
don't have the solar panels, but they were solar pumping it from that artisanal well to the trough.
Yeah.
But now the last 2 times I was there, it was actually dry.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
So
What elevation is that one at?
that's
1363. So it's a lot
higher.
higher.
Yeah.
But the spring's at 1275. So yeah.
Yes.
Well, we can worry about that when we're not getting up there yet. So
No.
yeah.
We don't even have a road access right now. It's
Yeah,
all
right. Well, we'll worry about that if we even get to that point.
Yes.
Some other
I think
time.
this is the main focus
Main
area.
zone. Yeah, cool.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's
We'll
good.
have
I
more
feel
clarity.
a lot better about where we're at as a result of today's conversation.
Yes.
And it's a relatively simple. There's a lot more simplicity in the project. I think I feel.
Yes.
So I think the next step for us will be, apart from the annotation, will be to start to develop a stronger set of detail, and then to annotate, the different zones, and then a bill of quantities, which will start to come from those. So there'll be a little bit of work in terms of at your end, in terms of looking at what the components will be, whether it's fencing or whether it's piping systems, not a
Yep.
huge amount. And if we can populate a spreadsheet with some of that information, I'll just share my screen before we go, just so I can show what that looks like. If you can just shut yours off, because we were just looking at this earlier today, yesterday in a Q&A. That's smaller. So we have what's called, which you will have seen before, the Regrarians workbook. Where are we? And so this is our workbook. Let's make that bigger. Which we started developing in the late 90s. So I started developing in the late 90s. So it's been a very iterative bit of process. Now, if we look at here as an example, this is I'll make this larger. This is a stock water system, right? So this is an actual what we call a bill of quantities, a BOQ, and it's a whole of system template, and it's from an actual job. And it's got the components in terms of tank 1, tank 2, what they are. In this case, because I gave this as a report to a client, I've used hyperlinks to show them exactly what that tank looks like and so on, what the different products are. Then when we come down into the pipes, you can see here where I was talking about pipeline 1, pipeline 2, etc. Well, within that length, there's a type of pipe, a diameter, a class, a length. There's the source and discharge. So the start of the pipe and where that section ends and what the difference is there. So you've got all of that in there, and then you've got the actual components. And as you can see, there's a regularity of what those components are, and that sort of carries through. So that's what I mean. If you can establish what joiners we've got, what their unit price is, and so on, then when it comes to using a template like this, we just swap out the bits and swap out the pricing, and then you've got this. And then it breaks everything up into like one length of pipe or one section of pipe is a project. And when you're talking to your people who are doing the work, or what you're leading a thing, you say, all right, well, we're working on pipe 2 this week, and these are the bits we need, and this is what we're going to do. And then you go to the next one, and then it makes it easier as well for the budgeting and so on when you play it like that. The same, we've got a similar one for, which is actually from the same project for fencing.
The fencing.
Yeah. So it's a bit simpler because there's less variables in a fencing system usually than there are in a piping system. So, so you've got the length, the number of posts, the amount of wire, how much the wire costs, how much all the bits cost, etc. And we ended up rolling this up as well. This was a very undulating, very difficult site, so it was quite expensive to fence, and it was quite expensive to water as well. So it was like $300 plus to set up a water system in this, and we can do that. I mean, on a flatter site, and I'd expect on yours it would be a damn sight cheaper than all of this, right? But yeah, you've got to do that so that you can just because you've got to get, if you're doing anything, you've got to work on a hectare, because everything you do is, your kilograms per hectare of beef production or bison production ultimately is going to give you the return on investment.
In that table, what is the column D? FG post?
Fiberglass.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you're combining steel posts like for the corners or what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is this one here is for Kiwi Tech fencing. So yeah.
Perfect.
So
well,
so there's those sorts of templates. If you want to find that, I've probably shared it with you before, but if you want to find it, then just I just put it in the economy section yesterday. So here it is here in the economy layer. You can just dump a layer and make a copy as your first. Otherwise, you stuff my template up.
Sounds perfect.
Yeah,
we'll do that.
There's a lot of other stuff in here too, which you may be interested in terms of like keyline ploughing calculators and all sorts of stuff, which I'll be using actually today, because I'm calculating. I've got a new client which they've got 25,000 hectares of agroforestry that they're looking to do, and I'm advising them on new machinery. So I'll be using this to help calculate that. There's a bunch. I've got lots of. So whenever I create a new template in my own calculations for a client, I generally put it in here. So there's a lot of different. There's a lot of different stuff in here. This one here is another version of that. There's lots of different stuff in here.
Very
Gantt charts, all sorts of fun stuff. All right. Thank you, mate.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
No
Darren.
worries. My pleasure. Thank you.
Very useful.
No worries at all.
We'll be in touch.
Sounds good. And let's see if we can catch up. In a week's time or something like that? Would that work for you?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll make a schedule and
maybe next Friday for you might.
Yeah, at 10 o'clock. Okay. My time. Yep. Sweet.
Yep.
All right. Great. Keep moving.
Amazing. Have a lovely day.
Yeah, I will, mate. I'll say hello to everyone and abrazos, hermano.
Abrazo, hermano. Ciao.
Yeah, ciao.